Our gospel message today comes from John chapter 10, verses 7 through 18. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flocks, scatter it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again, the command I receive from my Father." Would you pray with me? Holy Spirit, we thank you for this service this morning, for an opportunity to come and praise you and to worship you. Holy One, I ask that you continue to be with us, continue to fill us up, continue to speak to us. Amen. I was really excited when we got to read the 23rd Psalm today. It's one of my all-time favorite passages. I've probably been saying it since the time I was 3 or 4, and every time I do, I get goosebumps. It's also one of the only texts I still use the King James from, because I'm a big believer that if you use the 23rd Psalm in anything but the King James, you deserve the beating you will receive. But when I was getting ready for it, I realized I don't know that much about shepherds. To be honest, I didn't know a lot about shepherds today, and I didn't really know a lot about shepherds at the time of Jesus. So I did a little research, and I wanted to share some of this stuff with you. There were a couple different types of shepherds. One of the big differences between them were that some were nomads. They would just go wherever the grass was greenest and keep traveling and traveling, and they only would make it to their homes every once in a blue moon. The other were that they lived, many though, lived in town. They would have a house in their village, and there would be a pen behind it. And so at night, they would bring their sheep into the pen, but during the day, they would take them out to the neighboring fields. There were also kind of a different hierarchy of shepherds. There were those that were just pure peasants that were hired to take care of sheep. Then there were those who owned their own sheep, and that was kind of their livelihood. Then you got into the upper echelon of shepherdhood by taking care of a large estate's sheep. And then the highest was if you took care of the royal sheep. But even if you took care of the royal sheep, you were not considered important at all, especially by the time Jesus came. Basically, they were considered at about the same level as tax collectors. There was a saying that you should never buy a sheep from a shepherd because it was probably stolen. At the time of Jesus, because of this, one of the true big debates amongst rabbis and the learned was how could the 23rd Psalm still be relevant? Why would God ever be considered a shepherd, the lowly shepherd? Now they had some tools. They had a bag that they would keep a lot of food stuff in, more their food than for the sheep. They would have a staff that was used for walking or climbing up on things. Then they would have a knife that was used for eating, but also for self-defense. Their real tools, though, were their rod, which was about a yard big, and it was a stout stick. And with it, they could beat off many wild animals. And then if you know the story of David and Goliath, you can probably come up with the last one, remembering that David was a shepherd. The sling, where I guess I would use the sling against a wild animal before I would use the rod, because I don't really want to get that close. Some of the things that like to eat sheep, and probably shepherds as well, were hyenas, jackals, lions, wolves, bears, and then of course the thieves would come and try to take them away as well. They were out all day with their sheep, no matter the weather. We live in Kentucky. You understand weather. Think about that 100-degree days in the winter and the summer, or the freezing days in the winter, and all rain and sleet and hail and all that fun stuff they got to be outside in. So there were definitely better jobs out there than being a shepherd. Jesus had a way of turning everything on end. So when he came across and told about the Good Shepherd, I'm sure many people were wondered what he was talking about. He begins by saying he is the door to the sheepfold. Now, a sheepfold was a little stone enclosure that had one door. Usually it was made by the shepherds. But that was how they would go in and out every day. Every time they went in, the shepherd would count the sheep to make sure they were all there. And every time they went out, he would count the sheep to make sure they were all there. And he would count, and if there was one missing, he would go look for them. This is the door that Jesus claims to be. We, his chosen people, are brought into his fold. We are able to be in the security of the sheepfold, but then go into the abundance of the pastures outside with the shepherd right there. He also says that he is an owner of a sheep rather than the hired hand. I have to admit, like I said, I have 4 dogs right now, accidentally. And if I saw a predator coming to attack one of my dogs, probably a coyote would be the closest we would have here. You better believe I would be out there wrestling my dog away from those coyotes. Growing up in Florida was a little different because dogs' primary predator were alligators. But I have heard stories in my own hometown at least 2 or 3 times where an alligator was going after a dog and an owner ran after and tackled the alligator to get that dog away. Everyone I heard of, everybody lived, which was surprising, but if they aren't our pets, if they're not a dog we love or a cat that we somewhat like, we have a lot of neighborhood cats, they're fine. I'm not going to fight a coyote over the cats in the neighborhood. There's just that love that we have for our own. And a shepherd who owned their sheep, it was their livelihood. That's where they got their food from. It's where they got their milk from. It's where they got their clothes from. It's how they made money, by shearing of the sheep. Most of those sheep had been in their families for the sheep's whole life, because most of the time they were used for wool much more than for food. They had a connection with those sheep, and they would do anything to protect them. And that is who Jesus claims to be. But he also says he is the voice of the shepherd. Now, sheep could understand voices, not words, but voices. And so when a shepherd would call out to one of their sheep, more times than not, they would come. They knew that voice. They trusted that voice. And so they would come. Again, a lot like our dogs. Probably not a cat, but our dogs say, come on, and here they come. But if a normal, everyday person who just walks in out of the street, they would not. And Jesus says his sheep know his voice. And when he calls us by name, we come. Now there's only one real problem with Jesus being the good shepherd. It means that we're the sheep. I also did a little research on sheep because, again, I grew up in the city, so things like livestock aren't the things I know the most. They're flocking creatures. They like to all be together for safety. They tend to like to follow the leader. So if one sheep starts going off this way, they all tend to go right there with them. Usually what makes that one go off in that random direction is their bellies. They head to the food. And that's why one sheep may leave the flock. He starts eating and doesn't know where he ends up. I can relate to that one. Sheep are known to be timid. They tend to be extremely dumb. And they tend to be defenseless. I'm so glad we're sheep, aren't you? I think it's quite appropriate that this is who we are. We may not follow our bellies, but too often we stray away from our flock over the next thing or what we think will give us pleasure or excitement. And more times than not, it leads us into a very bad situation. Then, many times, we get timid. We know what's right, but it's very hard to do what's right. So we take the easy path. I'm going to let y'all judge for yourself on if you meet that dumb qualification. I'll admit I am from time to time. I do some things that are not very bright, and it also gets me in trouble. And when I'm out in the wilderness and a predator comes, I'm pretty sure I'm defenseless as well. And that is why we need our shepherd. Jesus takes care of us. Jesus is always calling us. When we go off by ourselves, he calls us back in. When it is time to go home and be in our flock, he brings us through the door. He makes sure that we are part of his flock. He loves us so much that no matter how big the bear is that comes or how many hyenas come, he will protect us. But our shepherd is not a normal shepherd. He is one who is risen from the dead. He has new life on Easter and has given us new life. So when he has called us to be one of his sheep, it is not for a few years. It is not for a short time. It is forever. It is our time on earth and our time beyond earth. Because he is the Easter shepherd, we can know joy more than we could ever experience on our own. We can know fulfillment when we are with the flock following our true leader. But to me, the most important part is that we can take comfort in our shepherd. When he is there with us, we know he is with us. And when he calls our names, we hear it. And we can just be at peace.